Hello everyone and welcome back to IELTS with Ms. Kieu. Today I give you the sample answers for 5 topics in part 2 and part 3 of the speaking forecast quarter 4 2021. Well, of note, my speaking samples today are not perfect in every way. In fact, it represents how a Band 8 student will perform in the real speaking test situation. You may get nervous, you may get a little bit of hesitation or repetition, you may not be fluent all the time, with some grammar mistakes here and there. But if we give you a real picture how things go, at the end of it, I will also give you some pieces of advice about part 2 and part 3, so stay tuned.
Alright, here's how we're gonna do it. First, you look at my suggested ideas of vocabulary and then you pause the video to practice by yourself. See how you're gonna deal with those questions first. And the third step is to look at my answers. You can turn on the subtitles to see the transcript, okay?
Describe an occasion when you were not allowed to use your mobile phone. Alright, I will tell you about a time when I was not allowed to use my mobile phone. That was during my flight from Ho Chi Minh City to Da Nang, which took around 1 hour. And of course, when you got on the plane, you are asked to turn off your mobile phone or switch it to the flight mode. Well, the reason behind this is because the wave emitted from your mobile phone can get interfered with the transmission from the plane to the air control, which can potentially put your flight at risk. So for that safety reason, all passengers are usually asked to turn off their mobile phones, which I think is very reasonable. Well, on top of that, another reason might be imagine that if everyone on my plane were allowed to had been allowed to use their mobile phones, I mean, the ambience, the atmosphere could have been crazily loud and noisy, which could have been really unpleasant to a lot of passengers who just wanted to be quiet. Having said that, I was not totally at ease with my mobile phone because it was such an indispensable part of my life. However, I still managed to survive because it was just 1 hour, and immediately after the flight landed off, I got my phone back and I was totally happy with it. How do young and old people use mobile phones differently? Of course, there must be differences between the way young and old people use their mobile phones. If we're talking about young people who are born in the 21st century or just a few years before that, they are basically digital native, so they are very tech savvy, and using mobile phones comes to them as pretty easy and pretty natural. At the same time, old people may have problems using mobile phones or any technological device in general because they just don't get used to using things with screens or too many buttons. Therefore, I really think you must be very patient when giving instructions to old people in terms of using mobile phones. Positive and negative impact do mobile phones have on friendship? What an interesting question. There must be both plus and negative points when it comes to using mobile phones. Well, I would go with the plus point first. Is that an obvious point is that mobile phones help people to get closer despite the geographical difference or the distance between them. So basically, people can communicate through phones or text messages or Viber or Facebook, so they can keep their friends or families updated. But the negative side is that With the over-reliance on mobile phones, young people tend to get themselves more isolated than before, which means that they forget how to communicate in the real-life situation and instead be lost and prefer to lock themselves up in the virtual world. Is it a waste of time to take pictures with mobile phones? Absolutely not. I can't really see any reasons why people may think taking a selfie is a waste of time. In fact, I think the combination between phones and cameras is the best invention that humankind can come up with. I mean, it saves lots of time and you don't have to carry 2 pieces of equipment but just one, which is really great. Do you think it is necessary to have laws on the use of mobile phones? I can completely understand why there are so many people who may think that mobile phones should be banned, just like cigarettes or alcohol, because it can be addicted, especially with young people. Having said that, because of the popularity and increasing popularity of mobile phones nowadays, I suppose that it would be really hard to completely separate mobile phones out of people's life. Instead, I think a more feasible solution can be giving clear instructions for people since they are young, how to use mobile phones appropriately. Describe your favorite singer or actor. To begin with, I will tell you about my favorite singer of all time. Her name is MhelyM. I probably think you have heard about this name because she has been in the Vietnamese showbiz for a very, very long time. I first heard her songs back when I was in secondary school, if I remember correctly, and that moment I fell in love completely with her songs and her style and everything about her, and still do until now. Besides her talents, she got such a strong personality that differentiates her from everyone else. And probably that's the reason why she managed to keep her fame during all the ups and downs in the market. She really knows how to recreate her image, how to make the top-notch musical performance, the top songs to attract her fans, and all sorts of things. I mean, I have huge respect for her. Besides singing, she also gets involved in acting and doing charity. And I think I can learn a lot from the way she dedicates herself to every single thing that she does. She has always been a huge inspiration for me. I mean, if I had known about her earlier, I think my life could have been much different because she's always inspired me, even though that we haven't met, and she's just amazing in a nutshell. What kind of music do people like at different ages? Well, if we're talking about young people, I think they mostly prefer listening to dynamic and vibrant music, such as pop music, rock music, or even someone may choose to listen to hard rock music, which is the kind of thing that I really cannot make sense of. But if we're talking about old people, I think they prefer traditional music, something calmer, something that is more quiet and melodious, Some even enjoy instrumental music that helps them to sleep easier. There's a difference between popular music now and popular music in the past in Vietnam. It's a very interesting question because the music taste really boils down to people's preferences. So there is really no common music that everyone likes, but I guess in the past, people had limited access to foreign music, let's say American music or Spanish music, for example. So I think the type of music that they used to listen to was mostly Vietnamese music. But now we are getting more closer because of the globalization. And because of that, young people can, can be into foreign music, especially American pop music, or maybe country music. Do Vietnamese parents require their children to learn to play musical instruments? Yes, I think lots of parents are requiring their children to learn to play a kind of musical instrument, such as guitar or the piano, because it's good for their children's creativity and cognitive development through music. But I don't really think that it must be a compulsory thing to do, because if someone don't really have a knack for artistic things, then we shouldn't force our children to play any kind of musical instruments. We should encourage them to play only when they really enjoy the music as well. Why do some people like to listen to live music while others prefer CDs? Well, I reckon live music can be more vibrant, can be more, lively than listening to music in CDs. And of course, with a singer's fans, buying tickets to a musical event of their idol can be a way to support their idols financially, rather than just buying their CDs. And it can be an opportunity to see their idols and maybe get a chance to, be close to their idol. But having said that, there are people who prefer just listening to CDs because they like to enjoy music in private. Describe a plan in your life that is not related to work or study. This is a really funny story, but I will share with you how my wedding plan turned out. I must say that this is one of the most challenging plans that I have ever done in my life, because after all, I had no experience of getting married before, and I was not trained to plan my marriage. Well, back in time, I was dating my boyfriend, now husband, at that time, and we decided to tie the knot and started getting planned for our important day. But little did I know that was just the start of the problem, because that event was not just about two people, it's about two families. And old people can get stubborn a lot, especially with Vietnamese old people. And it's a very important concept of keeping the faith, that we had to stand in between to solve conflicts between the two families all the time. When the day finally arrived, well, I didn't really imagine that there could be so many things in the last minute. I mean, if I had known that the event could have been so hectic, I could have learned, I could have more knowledge about how to handling these kind of situation. But yeah, I was young. So yes, there are so many things that I didn't know at that time. But thanks God that the event turned out to be fine, even though there's a little hurdles at the last minute. But yeah, we made it at the end of the day. Should parents make plans for children? I think parents can do that if their children are not capable of making certain decisions by themselves. For example, when children are very young, they are babies, so they basically have no awareness of the surrounding environment, and that's when parents can kind of step in and make decisions for their kids. When should children start to make plans for themselves? That's interesting. There's no certain age that children should or should not make decisions. It really depends on parents and the children as well. But I think parents should really put themselves in the right mindset, that they got to let loose of their children slowly and let them make small decisions starting from then when they're young, like something very simple, like choosing the color they like or choosing the friends they like. As a result, they get used to making decisions and be responsible for their decisions, and they can grow up to be more mature and independent. What things should be planned on a daily basis? Definitely yes. Things should be planned on a daily basis. In fact, it's a habit that I highly recommend everybody to take up because it's hugely beneficial to your life. For example, every time in the morning I wake up, and the very first thing that I do is making a to-do list to ensure that I have everything covered and finished by the end of the day. Are plans always necessary? Can people succeed without plans? I've mentioned before that planning is essential in life, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything must be planned. Well, as a matter of fact, you cannot plan every single thing in your life. There must be room for creativity, for spontaneity, so that you can enjoy life to the fullest, because life is as colorful as it is, and people must let loose, but relax sometimes so that they can really enjoy their life completely. Try a puzzle, jigsaw, crossword, etc. you have played. To begin with, I have always been a fan of puzzle and crossword, or sort of games like that in general. And since high school, back when I was in high school, I loved reading newspapers, especially student newspapers. And there's one of my favorite parts of the newspapers is the crossword at the end of it. I mean, I wouldn't have missed that part for the whole world, because the first reason was I really liked to be challenged. And the second reason was I did learn lots of English, beautiful English vocabulary just through solving the missing words in the crossword game. And the third reason, and also the most important reason, was because if I got all the missing words figured out and send the result to the publishers on time and be the first comer, then I could have received a very handsome reward. I mean, it was a small amount of money, but it was big for me at that time. Well, there was a particular time that I did successfully solve everything and sent my result to the publishers, and guess what? I did receive that money, and that really made my day. That encouraged me to solve more mysteries and learn more new words, and helped me to improve my English. Why do parents let their children play puzzles? The benefits when it comes to playing puzzles. When someone plays this kind of games, they get involved in solving a problem, which helps them to develop their cognition, develops their thinking. Basically, it's an exercise for the brain. I can go as far as to say that parents really should encourage their children, and the parents can play themselves as well to, to help their children develop their thinking. And it can also be a fun activity for family bonding. What kinds of puzzles improve people's intelligence? I don't know all the kinds of puzzles out there, but I guess that all the sort of puzzle games that you can come across do help with the enhancement of the brain, because with every single games like this, you got to learn to solve problems. And then, of course, your problem-solving skill will improve, and of course, it will help with your intelligence. For example, my uncle always asks his son to play puzzles with him. It's not only a fun thing to do with his son, but also a way to teach him about thinking logically. Why are detective stories attractive to people? Yes, you come to the right person to ask these questions, because I'm a huge fan of detective stories. I think the reason why is because I really like the feeling of being curious and have my own hypothesis about the ending of the story, and I mean can't wait until the end to find out. When the truth is unveiled and you realize that your hypothesis can be right or wrong, and it's especially very intriguing to have the bird's eye view of the story and be really have strong emotions for what is going on with the characters, and sometimes you can really see yourself in what is happening with the characters. Which do you think is better, a detective movie or is an original novel? I think it really boils down to people's preferences when it comes to whether you would like to read or to watch. Well, for people who prefer reading, I think they enjoy having their imagination fly, though they are free to imagine how the characters would look like, how the atmosphere would be like, and how everything will turn out at the end. But for people who like things to be lively, they enjoy having the visual aids from the movie, and they can feel like their characters come to life on screen. Describe a law on environmental protection your country should have. To begin with, there's one thing I must admit, is that Vietnam is not very famous for environmental protection at all. And in fact, there's so many things that we could have done to, to protect more our environment, but we didn't do. One of the area that I particularly concerned is animal protection. There's so many kinds of animals across our country, and many of them are in fact on the verge of extinction. A little did our government has done things about this problem. I mean, there have been laws about this, but I don't think these laws have been strict enough in terms of preventing the illegal hunting and poaching growing any further. I mean, we can see this in the way that in the numbers of dying species every year. And well, the more demand, the more supply. I mean, there are still people out there hunting for animal products, so that there are still hunters or poachers who are willing to go against the law or put their life at risk to make money. And the main reason that these kind of phenomenon still keep going on is the law was not strict enough. It had been strict from the beginning, then there could have been less, troubles nowadays. And I think there must be a call from the government to be, the government should be more active in this matter. There are laws about education in Vietnam. Definitely, we have laws about everything, and education is, of course, a very essential part in our life. And yes, we do have laws for that area. I'm not a law expert or a lawyer, so I really cannot tell specific what the laws say. But I guess we have regulation towards things like schools, teachers, teacher qualification, curriculum, design, and things like that to ensure that we provide the best environment for our next generation to grow. As a rules do schools in Vietnam have? There are so many rules when it comes to school. As far as I can remember, back when I was in high school, there's a specific rule that I kept breaking again and again. It was the rule about punctuality, and that I was always a latecomer, and I remember that everyone made fun of me for that. But little did I know that this habit could have, do harm to my life later on. What can teachers do to make students obey rules? Many ways we can do this. I mean, the first and the most common punishment is corporal punishment, which applied in most of the schools in Vietnam. But I don't really think that this kind of measure has been really effective in changing students' mindsets towards regulation. So the second measure we can think about is having students' participation in designing the regulation of the school. I know it can be hard, and it sometimes cannot be, students' opinions cannot be taken seriously by teachers, but having them actively participated in the process will, make them feel like having more authority and maybe follow the rules better. What should parents do to educate children about laws? The very first thing that parents can do is to be a good role model, which means that they got to set a good example for their children. They must be the one who follow laws and things like that. And the second thing is keep telling their children about the importance of following laws and why laws exist, and try to get your children in the right mindset about following laws so they don't feel like they are forced to do things, but they are doing it for their own benefits.
Alright, as promised, here's are the top 3 tips for part 2. The first thing that I learned when I'm dealing with part 2 is that you need to be familiar with manipulating the questions, which means that you may got the topic slightly changed. But the thing is, you must know how to redirect the topic to something that you're familiar with. So you don't need to think about new content. You just speak about the same thing with slight changes to meet the requirement of the topic, which makes your life a bit much more easier. The second point is that if you're aiming for 7 or above, you must think about demonstrate your range of grammar besides the range of vocabulary, which is an obvious thing, and lots of people knows about this. Range of grammar is more subtle and harder to adopt. Something like conditional sentence, modal verbs, past perfect tense, and passive voice are something that examiners will be pleased to hear. So keep that in mind. And the third point is try to speak for 2 minutes. I know the rule is from 1:30 to 2 minutes, but with the fluency criteria, it's about be able to fully develop your answer. So in case that your part 2 answer is not yet fully developed and you stop at 1 minute and 1 minute and 30 seconds, you might risk losing a little bit of your fluency criteria. So it's better to keep speaking until 2 minutes because you got interrupted in 2 minutes, and even when your answer was not yet complete, it is totally fine. So here we go, the 3 top tips that I get for the part 2. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe if you feel like this video is useful.